Well, 'tis the season, and for many families, Thanksgiving is the first gathering since the pandemic began, but that leaves us feeling a little bit extra stressed. We have Dr. Dan Rosen, chair of Bastyr University's Counseling and Health Psychology Department here to help us manage so we can actually enjoy Thanksgiving and be a little bit less stressed. Hey, good morning, Dr. Rosen.
Good morning.
All right, well, thank you so much for being here with us today. Let's start off with this question. The holidays bring a certain degree of stress, but this year kind of feels a little bit different. What are psychologists like you noticing?
Well, I think what we're noticing is that this time of year is often very difficult for people. And so we know that there are general seasonal parts to this time of year that make it challenging in terms of anxiety, stress, even depression. And I think you're right. There's this overlay of the pandemic this year that has made for additional challenges.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of breaking it down here, let's start off talking about COVID fear. One thing we mentioned, we're back, a lot of people gathering for the first time, and there's still that looming fear about catching COVID, being at gatherings, things like that. So how can we manage that one, either for ourselves or a loved one who is really afraid?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's about keeping first things first, and we're talking about prioritizing safety. So what each of us needs to feel safe is probably a little bit different. And the suggestion, I think, would be to do two things. First, we need to identify our needs. So asking, what do I need in order to feel safe? And that's going to be tricky because it's going to be different for different people depending on health status and concerns about contracting COVID. And then the second part is to express our needs. So to be able to express, what do I need in order to feel safe to be around others? So that might be inquiring about vaccination status. That might be, as a host, requesting that folks coming to a gathering are tested. That could even be politely declining an invitation if one feels that they don't feel safe being in the company of others or a group of people. So I think it's about identifying our needs and then expressing our needs as a first step.
I think we've all kind of gotten used to that too, just expecting maybe some people aren't going to feel comfortable going to a gathering or stuff like that. So you shouldn't feel too stressed about, going through that process. But for people who feel down around the holidays, this is something we hear about a lot. Just the holidays bring a lot of joy, but also can bring a lot of sadness for some people. So what's your suggestions for what we can do to help?
Yeah, I think that's a really astute observation. I think that what we see in advertisements, what we see on social media feeds, is that this is a unabashedly joyous, happy, celebratory time of year. But for many people, that's not the case. There are people who have suffered great personal losses, and I think are dealing with a lot of grief and mourning, perhaps the first time that the holidays are coming around without a loved one present. And for people who are dealing with feelings of sadness or depression, it can be extra alienating to see people around having a different experience. And the assumption, I think, a lot of times is that everyone else is having the shared experience, and it's just me that's feeling something different. And I think it's important that people remember that they are not alone, that it's actually quite a common experience for people to be struggling or experiencing distress. And then for those of us that do have some capacity, a reminder to take a look around in our communities, friends, families, neighbors, and noticing who needs some additional support. Who can I check in with? How can I make sure that my local food pantry has shelves that are well stocked? In other words, remembering that we're all part of a community.
Volunteering, stuff like that, is another tradition for many people during the holidays and can make you feel grateful and stuff like that. But also, I feel like we can't talk about all this without mentioning anxiety. So what should people do about all this holiday stress and managing anxiety?
Yeah, I think this is, for those people gathering, a time of year where we have really high expectations, even perhaps unrealistic expectations. And a quote from the author Stephen Covey comes to mind, and he wrote, "The main thing is keeping the main thing the main thing." And so I think it's important to remember that for many people, the main thing of the holidays is about togetherness, is about family, is about connection. And so if things feel overwhelming or stressful, especially in the context perhaps of family interactions or moments that feel overwhelming, to pull ourselves off that reactive, maybe autopilot sort of way of responding, and instead asking, okay, what is for me the main thing? How can I prioritize showing up in this moment in a way that it feels right to me, that's consistent with what I want to bring to this moment?
Well, great advice there, Dr. Dan Rosen, Chair of Bastyr University's Counseling and Health Psychology Department. Once again, thank you so much for being here with us today. Some great advice you gave.